James Longman joins me live now from Kyiv for more on this. And James, earlier this morning, you and I spoke right after an explosion hit close to where you were. So now that we know that you're okay, I want to take a look at that moment and then ask you a little bit more about it. And James, we're still waiting on official confirmation of what exactly that was, but what are you learning about it at this point?
Well, Diane, we just went to try and have a look. We drove down, it's something like 8 kilometres away, driving from where we are here. As the crow flies, it's actually a lot closer than that, and that's why we just we heard such an extraordinary explosion where we're standing here. It's very difficult to see any real impact, and the thing that really strikes you when you go down there is people just getting on with their lives. They haven't even closed the roads. People are just kind of driving down the main highway there. It's just alongside the river. I mean, we saw huge plumes of smoke coming up into the air, but very quickly they dispersed, and now people in that part of the city are just getting on with their lives. It just shows you that kind of getting on with life is a form of resistance here. People here in Ukraine just are defiant. They don't want to let Vladimir Putin continue this assault on their country, even under the very real possibility of death and the danger that continues. And it just underlines the feeling here in Ukraine that Russia is lying about moving away from the capital. They've told the world that they want to de-escalate, they want to move troops away from Kyiv. That may be happening, but they've continued their bombardment of certain suburbs. That's what we saw earlier this week. And now a target as yet unidentified, very central here in Kyiv. So for anyone thinking that the whole war is now reorientating towards the east of Ukraine, that just doesn't feel like that way here now, Diane.
Now, NATO's Secretary General says that Russia lied about withdrawing troops and that they're instead trying to regroup, resupply, and reinforce its offensive in the Donbas region in eastern Ukraine. What does that mean for peace talks?
Well, look, I mean, the Ukrainians are committed to trying to get a deal. They have said this from the very beginning. They very much obviously they're desperate for a deal. They want to stop this invasion. And I think they will be well aware of Russian games away from the negotiating table. This is a long trodden path that Russia has been on. Talk about wanting peace, sitting down for peace at the negotiation table, but continuing to exert pressure elsewhere. The difference this time is that Russia is up against an adversary here in Ukraine that understands how it plays the game. And so I think the Ukrainians will very much know that strikes like this on Kyiv, bombardments on other parts of the country, the continued bombardment of areas to the south in Ukraine, including areas where people are being given humanitarian aid, all of that is meant to push Ukraine away from the negotiating table. But so far, they're staying strong. Dan?
Now, Ukraine also says that its troops have retaken some territory outside of Kyiv and Chernihiv, where Russian forces have been pulling back. So how significant is that?
Well, hugely significant for the people who live there. We spoke to some who had fled Irpin, which is one of the suburbs that we're talking about here in Kyiv. It's a town just outside of Kyiv. And we spoke to a couple who had left, an 85-year-old man who had had a stroke some 12 years ago, being looked after by his wife, Svetlana. They were too frail to leave originally and just had to hunker down where they lived. They said that Russian troops had basically occupied their apartment building. They'd settled in apartments around them. And then as they left, as the Ukrainians moved in, Russian troops left and then launched a pretty kind of awful attack on the city. They continued their kind of indiscriminate bombardment of civilian areas. And so it is significant that the Ukrainians are retaking these areas, but it now gives the Russian forces the opportunity to continue with their bombardments. And for people like Svetlana and her husband Vladimir, you know, they have now left. They're waiting to be able to return to their town, which has apparently been retaken by the Ukrainians. But what will they find when they do? That's the big question for millions of people now here in Ukraine.
I'm sure. And James, the Russian Defense Ministry also announced a ceasefire in Mariupol to allow civilians from there to be evacuated. How are those humanitarian corridors holding up?
Well, on different days, you get different reports. I mean, we know that the World Food Programme, for example, has been able to operate there. They've been able to give out food. There's a suggestion that some 45% of Ukrainians are worried about getting food. But the kind of exit of civilians from Mariupol is also a political move on the Russians' part. They want to empty the city of as many civilians as possible who don't want the Russians to occupy that city. So I think you have to see this as, yes, it's an effort to get get people to safety, but also from the Russian point of view, they see Mariupol as Russian. So people can leave, and they can perhaps, maybe in the future, they plan on repopulating it with Russian speakers, making it a Russian city. Because whilst we're talking about, you know, Russia withdrawing from certain parts of Ukraine, Mariupol, that city, is very much in their sights as a place they want to keep. It's part of the greater Donbass region, and they see it as Russian. They want to keep it also for a strategic reason, because it forms a land bridge, if you like, from the Donbass towards the Crimea. So Mariupol has been in the crosshairs for very distinct reasons. Diane?
Right. James Longman in Kyiv, Ukraine for us. Stay safe, James. Thank you.